I'm going to talk a little bit. I don't know, can you guys hear me? So, actually, I don't know if you can hear me now. Much better. I'm going to talk about rebuilding after disaster. Quickly go through our organization, but I want to talk about this photo. This photo to me represents a pretty poignant moment. This was taken 6 seconds after the earthquake, right here. So this picture represents what's happened, what needs to happen, and how we recover. And how we recover is really important. Very quickly, I'm the co-founder of Architects for Humanity, and what we do is we provide professional design services to communities around the world. About 50% of our work is post-disaster and post-conflict reconstruction, and the other half is working on some systemic issues. More importantly, and what we've learned, it's not just about ideas. It is fantastic that you guys have come together and created thousands of ideas. But there are millions of ideas that can improve the world, but unless you build them, it doesn't matter one iota. So implementation of innovative and creative ideas will be the most important thing for this city. We have to discover new ways to invent the future, because as we rebuild this city, we're not building it for us. We're building it for people in their teens, in their 20s, because when you build a building, it's supposed to last 40, 50, 100 years. So in essence, whilst we're rebuilding to recover, we should be thinking about the 2050 initiatives, what will be the perfect city in 2050. But also, reconstruction isn't just about building back better, but it's how do we create social and economic change in our community. So our focus is on how do we innovate in that. And that's done by a community-led design and construction process, involving the stakeholders on the ground, those who have been affected, those who are going to be living here. And it shouldn't be a top-level design process, it should be a bottom-up process. Our organization does this by embedding our architects and designers within communities that have been affected. They live in these communities, and quite often they're from the communities. We partner them with those local professionals. And we integrate kind of social and cultural sustainability in this. The other thing that you'll notice after 6 months is people will stop talking about the CBD, and they'll start talking about jobs. People need jobs. And how do we do job creation through the reconstruction process? So we work in an open source manner. As we do our work, we use Creative Commons as a mechanism to share our innovation around the world. So far, we've done about 400 projects in 44 countries, and this year we'll be building in 20 countries. We, as well as our organization, we're based in San Francisco and have offices in Port-au-Prince, Sendai, and Cape Town. We actually have a decentralized mechanism, local city chapters all over the world, and this represents around about 5,000 professionals who are focused on active projects in their cities. A number of years ago, a bunch of crazy architects from Auckland said, we feel that New Zealand needs a space where we can tackle a number of issues, whether it's homelessness, whether it's integration and sustainability, whether it's working with indigenous populations, figuring out how to create dignified housing. And they've been working for years with all these topics. But of course, when the quake happened, they started getting dozens of requests for help. So I'll talk about that towards the end. But I want to do a case study, which is the Battle for East Biloxi. There's a good analogy here. When you look at Katrina, everyone focuses on New Orleans, but actually the entire coast was devastated. And we found ourselves in East Biloxi. One thing to note about reconstruction is it's not about being the first responder, but it's about being the last responder. It's about the fact that you have 4 days to announce your intent to help and get involved. You have 4 weeks to really raise any of the funds on a private sector to rebuild. And then you have to commit to 4 years of reconstruction. So you know, the harsh reality is less than 3 weeks after the quake here, there was a tragic tsunami up in Japan. And you know, in the States, we are not hearing anything about New Zealand because we're all focused on what's happening in Japan. So as a result, the kind of direction towards where to help was focused up north. And so as a resilient city, you guys are really going to have to step up because you know this is becoming the forgotten disaster of this year, and we need to really focus in. So it's about being this kind of very fast-moving tugboat, and not a slow-moving oil tanker. And so I'll give an example of East Biloxi. This is where we lived for many months. We slept in car parks, we slept in tents, we slept in trailers, and we figured out what were the communities that needed rebuilding. We were listening to the government coming in with ideas for FEMA trailers. And these trailers, we spent billions of dollars on creating these trailers. The problem with these trailers is, in the South, the mold issue was just absolutely diabolical to these trailers. But also the off-gassing actually created cancer. So we actually had mechanisms that were detrimental. So this is disaster after disaster. And this can't happen here. Insurance companies that didn't pay people back because this was known as water damage. But any trained professional would say this is a condemned home that needs to be torn down. So this woman in her 80s was given $7,000 to repair her home. But anyone who walked in here would say, you need to rebuild. So how do we do that? That's by having lots of stakeholders come together on one umbrella, not NGOs fighting for funding, but saying, look, let's create a mechanism that allows us to rebuild the entire city with all the people with the skill sets from relief, recovery, reconstruction to economic development. And we look for the people that are true leaders. We begin to find in the reconstruction process, but that quiet woman who came to the city council meeting every month will become your greatest advocate for changing the city, because she's been listening and understands the politics. So to understand that the people that you least expect will become your heroes. Access to funds and access to labor are important. So we did this by raising money. Most of our money is raised online from on Facebook and Twitter and social networks. We got grants. We were able to invest that into a reconstruction center and then be able to scale that work. Gandhi once said that we need to be the change we want to see in the world. In the reconstruction process, it's be the bank. If you control the financing of your city, you can actually make sure that the visionary ideas that you guys have come up with actually implemented. So by controlling the funding and putting it into the names of the families affected, we can make sure that we can implement that work. Constantly building this coalition of building professionals and groups that are willing to donate and creating a huge coalition. Working with thousands of organizations that are coming down and coordinating that was vitally important. So we do this by creating a community rebuilding center. And if I give one piece of advice for the city is to have a center that is stocked with pro bono professionals that would deal with all the myriad of issues that you're going to deal with, and to try and make sure these innovative ideas are put into place. And done in a way that is not just about investment of the capital that you guys are going to get from the budget, but make sure that it supports small business that hire locally and train locally so that you can have an economic recovery mechanism within the reconstruction process. You have an accountability process. The way we did this is we had chalkboards. If your name went on that board, you were getting a house. We would not rest until you got into your new home. And because this was very visual, it meant that families and neighbors and friends could see their colleagues up on that wall and say, okay, I understand the process now. I understand how long it's going to take. So you need to be very visual about the way we communicate. Mapping the city in a way that we can distribute groups in the reconstruction process. And then understanding that whilst there are these visionary ideas that get put forward, these grand plans, the reality is this is the way people are living. They're living in very substandard conditions. And they don't really care about kind of these kind of grand ideas. What they care about is how do I get home and how do I get my business started. So figuring out that mechanism, helping with the clearance, getting thousands of students and professionals in the clearing process, and doing skills training. This photo is not taken at 4 in the afternoon. This is a kind of teaching how to do sheetrock. This is at 2 in the morning after many of these young 20-somethings took the semester off school, came down to Biloxi, would work 17 hours gutting houses and helping clear, and then would go and do these lessons until 4 in the morning. So really hard work happening. Urban acupuncture. If you really want to build a city that people want to live in, it's not just about having, here's the business district, here's where you live, here's the peripheral businesses. You need to weave a city together that has these acupuncture points of recovery. So one of the first things we did is we picked out small projects that we can implement in innovative ways very rapidly to show the city that we can rebuild. And this was more a key to allow the reconstruction process to do. Infill development, rather than whole-scale plans, looking at the gaps in the teeth and figuring out a way to fill them in. Small grant programs to help doing that reconstruction process move very rapidly. These are homes that had about $25,000 investment. They're not beautiful, but they're strong, safe homes for families to return. New build construction, this is 2 to 3 bedroom homes done for $100,000, built up in a few months. And then we had this interesting situation where we came up with an idea with innovative housing strategy, and we get a phone call from a woman in Chicago. She has a talk show, or she did. And when you get a phone call from this woman, you kind of think it's a joke. And I said, well, I was from Mississippi and I want to help do this. And I was like, okay, well, let's work. We worked with Oprah's Angel Network to do a rebuilding strategy. We had an open forum. Architects presented their ideas to the city of innovative housing solutions. But the way we did it was a community focus. So we empowered individuals with grant money to select the architects they wanted to work with to rebuild their city. So not telling people how they want to live, but giving them the option. And being able to go in there and say, okay, we're ready to rebuild. They came up with the most innovative housing solutions, but more importantly was to get them built. So, while the ideas of these, and I can talk about how these are the most energy efficient structures and cost effective structures, but more importantly the families and making sure the families get back home and they can get back to work. So all our architects, their cell phone numbers are on the family's cell phone. So if the contractor isn't at work at 7 in the morning, they get a phone call saying, where's my damn house? So that meant that you got week 1, week 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and in 8 weeks you've got a brand new home that actually has a rental property. And we did this again and again and again and again, house after house after house, helping people get back. What I love about this one, and I know I'm running out of time, but Marlon Blackwell, the architect, he was selected by Richard Tyler, big guy, and he had 2 teenage kids in a tiny lot, and he said, I need a 2-story house. He said, we don't really have the money for that. He said, I have to have it. And we said, you're going to have a really tiny house, and he selected this. And he said, well, you have to understand, I have 2 teenage kids. How many of you have teenage kids? How many of you want to get rid of them? That's exactly, he said, Katrina was a bitch, but my kids are killing me. So he said, you gotta get me. And I said, you sure you want this house? And he's like, you know what? That's an ugly house, but I love it. It's my house, right? So you can't define what people want based on aesthetics. It's their needs. And so these houses began to get built. And collectively, this coalition rebuilt 93% of East Biloxi without any federal money coming in. We were then able to recapture those funds. 70% of those funds were recaptured, which meant that you got a brand new house for less than $40,000. And the community came together and saw this transformation of the community done from the ground up. We were able to get about 722 families back in their homes in about 4 years. So I have 5 minutes, and I'm quickly going to talk about scaling. So we have 7 billion people in the world. And how do we help them have dignified housing? So I was very lucky. About 5 years ago, I got called by this guy. He said he won the TED Prize. I said, who's Ted? But from that came this idea of, could we create a mechanism, this open source mechanism, to manage and share these projects, not just in post-disaster situations, but all over the world, that we can do construction projects virtually and tie together the communities and give them a mechanism to find innovation. And that project has spread rapidly. Over 6,000 projects are there, from straw bale lending libraries on the reservations to low-cost housing in Haiti, to my personal favorite. So up in the Sudanese-Kenyan border, there's these rural villages, and the doctor would go and visit in a village, and they would set up the clinic, and they would treat people for a week, and then they'd wrap up the clinic. It's a tensile structure, and they put it on the back of a camel. And there's a solar panel on the camel, and you whack the camel on the rear, and the thing walks to the next village, and it generates enough energy to run the clinic in the next village. So even the craziest ideas are important. Rainwater catchment facilities that provides clean water for the whole village under a basketball court. This actually is somewhere between the U.S.-Mexico border as a safe shelter for people. I'm not sure who did it, and I'm not going to go into it, but also politics plays a part. We were able to create geotagging, which means that you can go in and see exactly where your project is, scale it up, you pinpoint exactly live data of what's happening. What happens if we did that right here? You could zoom in right into the CBD and see exactly what's being spent by the government, who's doing it, and true accountability. Last week, I joined the Obama administration as an advisor for USA. And part of my initiative is to reform international aid so that we can create a truly transparent mechanism for us to understand, what is this multi-billion dollar industry? How can we create a system where it's actually not the funder or the implementing partner that's in charge, but the recipient community has a voice in the rebuilding of their community, and allowing them to have not only a say in the design, but to see openly that data. So we've been doing this by creating this mechanism to create and build and learn, to create this kind of sustainable development process. And we do this so that both the funder can see clear identity of the projects, they can see how much it's costing, they can see who's implementing it, the implementing partner can share with all of the stakeholders in the construction and the build process. And then the recipient community, we're now working with mobile technology so that families can actually just, if the mayor says we're going to build a park in one part of the city, the residents can go and take a picture of that park, geotag it, upload it, and say, where are we with this? And you begin to have crowd transparency so that we hold our officials accountable to the promises that are made. So I'm just going to end. I have 2 minutes. And the reason I'm going to end is I have a 5-year-old. And I read to her every night. I use Skype video, and we communicate. And there's a story that I read her all the time. And when I said I would come and come give this talk, this story kept popping in my mind. And it's about how the kiwi lost his wings. One day, Tenemahatu was walking in the cool of the forest when he noticed some of his children, the trees, were not well. Their branches were drooping and their leaves were dying. Then Tenemahatu knew that the trees would never recover if one of the birds who lived high up in the treetops did not come down and live on the forest floor instead. If the trees died, the birds would disappear too. Tenemahatu called up to the birds as they sang and fluttered overhead, "Which one of you will come down and save your brothers, the trees?" One by one, the birds refused. They looked in the dark, cold earth below. They looked up at the sunlight shining in the trees above. "All of my family's here. I cannot leave them," chirped one. "I'm busy building a nest and I cannot stop now," twittered another. Had a hashtag, I'm sure. Tenemahatu's heart was very heavy. Last of all, he knew the kiwi. He asked the kiwi if he'd be willing to come down and live far below. The kiwi looked around at the sunshine, saw his family and his nest, but he knew what he must do. "I will come," he said. "Do you understand what this means?" said Tenemahatu. "Your legs will become thick and stocky so that you can scratch the earth and rotting logs. Your beautiful feathers will become dull and brown, and you will no longer be able to fly. You'll never be able to see the treetops or the other jeweled birds again." "I understand," said the kiwi. "I'm willing to come." Then Tenemahatu's heart was filled with joy, and he knew that the trees would be saved and the birds would live on the forest. "You may not be beautiful," he told the kiwi, "but because of your courage, you'll become the best loved bird in the land." Now, when I think about that, I think about Christchurch. There's going to be a lot of people fluttering ideas, talking about grand visions. But there's going to be a few of you who get down on the ground here. And it won't be the sexy work, it won't get a lot of interest, and people will give you lots of reasons why you can't do things. But you will be the best loved bird in the land. I'm going to end on our mantra. And I want to just recognize quickly, we only raised a little bit of money for New Zealand, and we're investing it in helping our chapter, AFH Auckland, and their counterparts here in Christchurch. For you guys to stand up quickly. To help with the Unlimited School, and for any students who are here, can you guys stand up? So, say one quick thing. I got an email message from some random person from Christchurch who found out what we were trying to help the Unlimited School. We had sent over Imogen Heap a few weeks ago. We just raised some money from Jack Black so we can go towards the school. And they said, please, please, please help rebuild this school. And I said, we're going to do what we can. He said, those damn kids have taken over the library and they're a terror. You have to get that school. So I fell in love with the school because it follows our mantra, which is follow your heart, break the rules, and get it built. Thank you very much.